In this lesson, we'll begin building control objects, and the first one we will create will be the global control. So in the scene, we have a more refined skin. If we were to go to Tools, Manage Layers, we can go ahead and freeze our model, go ahead and grab the shoulder, and take a look. As we start to move that around, we should notice a better deformation. And that's simply just a matter of just keeping track of our edge flow, making sure it flows nicely as we paint weights. We should also make sure that our bones are in the right spot. If you notice that that's not the case, chances are you want to just go ahead and remove your skin, then go ahead and adjust the bone's placement. If you need to mirror that bone across again, make sure to do so, just to save time on the opposite half. And then as long as you make sure that you go ahead and save out all of your weights, you can get back to where you were before in no time at all. Gotta enjoy the skinning tools in 3ds Max. Alright, so let's go ahead and Alt right click and use Transform to 0 to bring the shoulder back. Alright, so I'd like to point out just a few things before we build our global control. For one, again, we want to make sure that we skin all objects to these bone objects that we've created from them. It might seem pretty straightforward, but it's very easy to overlook certain items when they're kind of itty-bitty and they seem insignificant. For example, when it comes to the eyes, I've just skinned them to the head bone. I've essentially added the head plate and the eyes to the same skin node. But if you wanted to, you could always go in and create an eye bone. And if you're wanting to learn a little bit more about how to set up eye controls or facial controls for that matter, feel free to take a look at our facial rigging course in 3ds Max. When it comes to these auxiliary arms, we really just need to skin them to the bone objects here, so we can find them very easily by simply, let's say, going to our skin modifier. From there we can go ahead and click on Add, and remember, using the find field, we can type in bn underscore, put in an asterisk, and then type in AUX. Simply put, this name here is the same name that is used for all of those objects. So to add them quickly, we can simply go ahead and type this in, and 3ds Max is going to kind of filter out everything else, so we can just go ahead and click on Select, and they're added. And you shouldn't have to adjust the weighting. The envelope should be just enough where they kind of wrap around each area they should affect, so you should be able to save time. Alright, sweet. Now, one more thing to point out about skinning is the mirror threshold. Let's go ahead and click on the body, click on the skin modifier to enter into edit envelope mode. So if you notice that when you go ahead and click on mirror mode that you have a few red areas on either the left or right halves, well, chances are you want to increase your mirror threshold so that it will increase the accuracy of your mirror. What we want to see is just blue and just green. If you have any red, it might show up in the center, and that's simply because these either represent the center of our character or areas that Max doesn't quite know what to do when it comes to mirroring that information across. So we should see that in the center, but on the left and right halves, as long as we're working with a symmetrical character, we should see either green or blue. And if you need to increase your accuracy, go ahead and increase this value. Alrighty, well, let's say we go ahead and build that global control now. Let's go ahead and head over to our Create panel, and we'll create a line. Now, what I like to do is give direction when it comes to making this control. So let's go ahead and build a triangle, and the point of that triangle will essentially show us the forward direction of our character. We'll press the S key so we can snap to grid, and we'll quickly draw out the shape. Now, the great thing about working with a line or any one of these shapes is that by default they do not appear in a render, so it makes them ideal for controls, and we can easily customize them as well. Take a look, this object has thickness. Let's go to right click to exit the line tool, and we'll also press the S key. Thickness can be enabled from the modify panel. If we go to the rendering rollout, take a look, we can go ahead and enable that in the viewport, and we can adjust our thickness parameter to get something a little bit thicker or not as thick. So I find that to be super cool. Then if you wanted to, you can go in to your vertex of object level and customize this shape a little bit more. So you can select all of your points, go ahead and grab your scale tool, make sure it's set to the center of your selection, and maybe kind of squash the shape a bit in the y-axis, and then just bring it up a little bit more in all axes so it's easy to select. Alright, great. Now from here, with it still selected, let's go ahead and come up with a color scheme, something that will be very clear for animators, because chances are the animation is going to get pretty crazy with this creature when it comes to animating, let's say, his fall and things like that. We want to always keep track of our controls. So what we can do then is just go ahead and color code those objects so we know what is what. So with this global control, we can go ahead and use, let's say, a shade of yellow, simply because it's at the center of the model. When it comes to our left and right halves, we can work with, let's say, blue for the left side and a shade of green for the right side, all for clarity. Let's also make sure that we use the same prefix for all of our controls. So we'll go ahead and work with anim as our prefix. So it's anim underscore global 01. Great. We'll make sure it's stored in our controls layer. Another thing we want to do is go in and reset its X form. And this is very important when we start to drastically change the size of our control objects. You'll notice that when you enable thickness after you change the size drastically, that the thickness might be totally off. So to update that object, to refresh it, you can go ahead and reset its X form. And then remember, once we do that, we want to collapse it down to remove the X form modifier. So let's go ahead and make sure we're using this first choice modifier stack result and click on collapse selected. Alright, great. Now once we manage to do that, if we plan on linking this object to anything else, this would be the time before we freeze transformations. Now, since this is the global node and it's not necessarily going to be linked to anything else, we can just go ahead and Alt-right click now and choose Freeze Transform. Now it's time to go ahead and link our root bone. So we can go ahead and select that, grab our link tool, link over to that object, and then we want to freeze the transformations of that root to update its transformation data. Alright, sweet. So now we have a way to globally reposition the character, reorient the character, and resize the character, which is super exciting. Great stuff. Alright, well, we've managed to create a global control. Now, in the next lesson, we'll go ahead and build control objects for the gaster and for the vertebrae.